Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And you can't talk about racism in this country anymore without being labelled a member of the liberal elite. Honestly, where will it all end? And it will begin this morning with an examination of this palpably absurd and deeply dangerous idea of forcing firms to declare the nationality of their employees. I wonder whether we could make everybody wear a sort of badge with an F on it to denote their foreign status. That'd be a good idea. But maybe we could put something on their sleeves so that everybody at work would know that they were sticking out. But of course the reason for this is that our wages are being driven down by all the foreign workers. And you can find out whether that's true or not by just asking the person next to you right now at work, especially if you're a journalist. Go on, just ask them. That's what I did this morning. Spoke to some younger colleagues, asked them what they were getting per day now, compared it to what I was getting when I started out in journalism 20 years ago. And guess what? It's not gone up. Completely solid. In fact, I think it's gone down. What I would get for a day rate shift at the Daily Express in about 1995 is now less than what young freelance colleagues tell me they get for a day rate at national news organisations. Now, I don't mention this to be pitiful, and I'm not asking for a start, I'm not in that category anymore. I'm a division or two higher. But it just suddenly occurred to me, as I'm so frustrated this morning with the appalling attempts to persuade people whose lives are less than ideal, that the reason why their lives are less than ideal is because of people who've got even less than them. It's beautiful politics from Theresa May, this speech. Focus on the liberal elite, blame all the nation's problems on immigration, and then all your friends, remember she was having dinner with Rupert Murdoch last week, all your friends who are actually running the country walk away for another generation absolutely scot-free. And it's worse than I can remember it being, actually. This notion that you would be somehow labelled as foreign at work. It's quite incredible. I don't know if it'll actually happen, because the other wonderful bit of this politics is that it distracts attention from really important things, like whether or not anybody's got a clue yet how Brexit is going to unfold. Oh, we don't need to talk about that. We're talking about foreign workers having to wear special badges, or at least to appear on special lists, and firms declaring where their workforce comes from. But what I want to look at is this this notion of wages being pushed down. And what I want you to do is explain to me why journalists, who are often the people telling you that wages are being pushed down in the construction trade or elsewhere, journalists haven't had a pay rise for 20 years. In fact, for ordinary journalists, rather than the sort of big ticket operators, for ordinary journalists, wages have frozen or gone down. Your day rate for a shift here or at a newspaper is pretty much the same as it was in about 2004, possibly even earlier. And this is a really interesting question for a heap of reasons, not least because we're supposed to be the liberal elite. Some journalists, I mean, don't forget 80 to 90% of journalism in this country, newspaper-based journalism, is right-wing. But still, you have a prime minister standing up talking about commentators sneering at the working classes. What do you do for a living? Okay, doctor. Have you had a big pay rise over the last 10, 20 years? No, it's pretty much stayed the same. I'm in the public sector, James. We've actually had an official pay freeze imposed by government. An official pay freeze imposed by government if you work in the public sector. So whose wages have actually gone up during the last, let's say, 2 decades? Genuine question. And how confident can we be that the fact that doctors don't get paid as much as they used to, wages set by government, teachers don't get paid as much as they used to, wages set by government, firefighters don't get paid as much as they used to, wages set by government, is all the fault of immigration? It's so patronising, but it works. Of course it works. How do you feel as somebody who works here to discover today that you're not actually a valued member of our society, you're just tolerated? 0345 606 0973. And I know there's a terrible tendency to reach for Nazi ideology whenever you're discussing modern politics. I think they've even given it a name. It's called Godwin's Law, isn't it? But just try this on for size as well, because this really stopped me in my tracks this morning. I want to read you something from from Amber Rudd's speech yesterday. For the state must draw a sharp line of distinction between those who, as members of the nation, are the foundation and support of its existence and greatness, and those who are domiciled in the state simply as earners of their livelihood there. Very important that firms declare how much of their workforce is foreign, because they're just domiciled in this state simply as earners of their livelihood there. They're not members of the nation. They're not members of the foundation and the support of the nation's existence and greatness. You have to have a sharp line of distinction between those who are members of the nation and those who are just domiciled here as earners of their livelihoods. No, that wasn't Amber Rudd's speech yesterday. I'm really sorry. That's from Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. A sharp line of distinction between those who, as members of the nation, are the foundation and support of its existence, and those who are domiciled in the state simply as earners of their livelihood here. Do you recognise that need for a sharp distinction? Do you feel it? Do you applaud that today? Do you cheer it? Because you've heard some meaningless anecdote about a plasterer whose wages have gone up by roughly the same percentage over the last 10 or 15 years that almost everybody else in the British workforce has. You see the need for that sharp line of distinction? You're going to swallow that today? A sharp line of distinction between those who are the foundation and support of the nation's existence and greatness, and those, like almost everybody I've encountered so far today, who are just domiciled in the state simply as earners of their livelihood here. What do you think will come next? If you're going to have a sharp line of distinction between people born here and people who just work here, you're enacting chapter 2 of Mein Kampf. Strange times. God knows what question I'm going to ask you at the end of this introduction, but if you've already got something to say, the number you need is 0345 6060973. So I was sort of thinking about my morning today when I wondered if I spoke to a colleague who's American. And, am I supposed to feel, phoned me when I was sitting in the car on the way to work. My driver this morning on the way to work was Serbian. What is it that I don't feel that these people do? I get into the car, I hear a Serbian accent. I'm supposed to feel Serbian. Am I? I take a call off my manager who's American. Am I supposed to go, oh God, I wish I could find a British one. Wish I had a British manager. Got a bloody American manager. I wish I had a British manager. My driver is a Serb. Get to work. Walk past one colleague who is of West Indian extraction. Am I supposed to feel something bad about that? I go, oh God, he's West Indian on the front desk at work. I go up the stairs. There's a Muslim sitting behind the desk with a beard. Oh God, there's a Muslim with a beard. What is it that these people feel that I don't? I really need to know. What is it that is inside the people who will cheer today the suggestion that the state must draw a sharp line of distinction between those who are the foundation and the support of its existence and those who are domiciled here simply as earners? Don't know where the lady who was cleaning the lift when I got into it comes from. I think she's African. To my shame, I've never asked her. But I don't feel any sense of disgust or shock or disappointment when I clock the fact that she's not native to this country. Am I supposed to? I'll get a bus later today. Almost certainly it will be driven by somebody of Eastern European extraction, because most buses I catch these days are. Not exclusively. Am I supposed to feel something? What is it I'm supposed to feel? What is it I'm supposed to feel? I just don't know. I just don't know. I don't think you're racist if you've got fears about immigration. I think you're probably wrong if you honestly believe your life would be improved by treating foreigners worse. But my goodness me, it doesn't make you racist to believe lies. What am I supposed to feel? Yesterday, walking through a shopping centre in Hammersmith, a bloke comes up, asks me for a selfie. Lovely bloke. Name of Hussein. Am I supposed to react to the fact that his name is Hussein by going, ugh, why can't I have a nice British name like John? And then when he takes me to his wonderful cafe that he's just opened in that shopping centre and offers me a free Portuguese custard tart, am I supposed to go, no, sorry, mate. I only want free custard tarts off people called Nigel or Derek or Roger. I don't get it. I don't get what it is that half the country feels and the other half doesn't, if indeed it is half the country. Do you honestly get on a bus, clock the accent of the driver and feel somehow different from how you would if the accent was the same as yours? Is that how it works? Do you honestly think that we do need to draw a sharp line of distinction between those who are the foundation and the support of his existence and those who are merely domiciled here as earners, the foreign worker? versus what? Because it's not that long ago I spent every day banging my head against the brick wall of unemployment, trying to persuade people that the right-wing journalists describing all unemployed as work-shy, feckless layabouts with a season ticket for the food bank and addiction to flat-screen television were lying to you. Every day I sat here and said, they're lying to you. People don't go to food banks because they're feckless, they go to food banks because they're desperate. And the same journalists who are now saying that your wages have been driven down because of immigration, or that unemployment is caused by the fact that foreign people are doing the jobs, the same journalists and commentators that did that were telling you back then that the only reason people ever needed help from the state was because they were feckless, work-shy layabouts. The same people, it's the same columnists, the same rhetoric, the same front pages. Go back, what, is it 3 years we were doing that every day? Just bizarre. The same people telling you to hate on the unemployed are now telling you, oh, you've got to stick up for the unemployed because they're not foreign. And we're kind of letting it happen, and I don't know anymore, between you and me, I don't know anymore whether or not the people in my profession realise what they're doing, whether they actually ever stop to think about what they're doing. Whether, for example, if a journalist starts moaning about how construction workers have had their wages absolutely levelled by immigration, a journalist apparently doesn't know that the same thing has happened in her own profession. How can that happen? How can you not turn to a colleague and say, what's happened to your wages over the last 15 years? Haven't moved a cent, James. Seriously, I'm getting the same day rate now that I was getting in 1999. Really? Yeah. So why then have you gone and written a newspaper column about how building workers have been squeezed by immigration when your own colleagues have suffered from exactly the same pay freeze? Hand on heart, who do you know that's had a proper pay rise in recent years? You can probably think of some individuals. Can you think of a sector? A sector that's had a pay rise? I don't know, probably bankers, FTSE 100 chief executives. So I am a white British journalist presenting a radio programme. The best paid radio hosts in the world are American and Australian, the best paid advocates of what we do. So this job could be taken by an American immediately. Would that make me a bit more racist if it was? I just don't know. Talk me through your morning and how many people who may not have been born here you've encountered. And tell me honestly, I'll try not to get cross with you, but I will struggle perhaps. Tell me honestly why their place of birth bothers you. 0345 6060973. The bus driver from Bosnia, what's wrong with that? The accountant from Armenia, what's wrong with that? The Australian bartender, the Pakistani, I don't know, sandwich maker, whatever it might be, professional, menial, manual. Why does it bother people what country they were born in? And what is it that people like me don't see? What is it we miss? What is it we just don't get, us liberal elites who sneer at people for being patriotic, apparently? It's a country now that is divided not just along ethnic and racial lines, but it's now, it would appear, if the Prime Minister's speech is being accurately reported, we're supposed to turn on each other now for not agreeing on how awful foreigners are. People who think foreigners are awful versus people who don't. Yet another division, yet another fault line being imprinted on our country by politicians who routinely are courted by the billionaire media owners who thrive on division. You sell a hell of a lot more papers with a free ticket for the ghost train on the front cover than you do with a free ticket for the speak your weight machine. So help me, please. Help me understand what it is you feel when you clock the fact that your bus is being driven by a pole or your neighbour's extension is being built by a lithium. What is it I don't feel that you do you think? 0345 6060973. I am a proud member of the liberal elite. By liberal, I mean I believe in freedom and equality, and by elite, I mean I believe in excellence. What's wrong with freedom? And when did excellence become a bad thing? I want you to tell me why journalists don't blame the fact that their wages haven't gone up for the best part of 20 years, including colleagues of mine that I'm looking at now. Why we don't blame that on immigration. 0345 6060973. And just to sort of lick your finger, stick it in the air, take the temperature of the nation, because I'm afraid I don't care where you come from. I care only how you treat me. And that makes me weird in Theresa May's Britain. And I want your help in understanding why. I don't care where you come from. I care only how you conduct yourself. Roshani is in Southfields. Roshani, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. My dad emigrated to England in 1965 as a newly qualified doctor from Sri Lanka, and he spent, all his working life in the NHS. And I was going to say, I've obviously grown up here since I was about 2, and my children are half Sri Lankan, or half Sinhalese and half Welsh. I love Great Britain.
That's some long words.
I love Great Britain.
That is some seriously long words. I bet Scrabble is fun in your family. Welsh and Sri Lankan. That's absolutely first-class combination.
Welshese. And they look really British, They don't look a little bit Asian at all. But I was going to say, it's not really what you look like on the outside. It's how you think of Great Britain as your home, and what you do for it, really, what you contribute.
No, it's not. Not anymore. It used to be. You used to be able to decide who you were, but now you're going to get told by government who you are, and if you weren't born here, you're going to get stuck on a list.
Well, they're basically desperate, aren't they? Because
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I could come up with a really ugly analysis of what this represents, but I'm still leaning perhaps naively towards the idea that it's just another distraction from the Brexit shambles.
Well, I think that's what it is, and they just want people to go willingly if they will, Eastern European or newly new immigrants, if you like. I think they just want them to leave willingly, get scared, and
we make the situation here so toxic that the immigration problem is solved by the fact that nobody would dream of coming here in 1,000 years.
That's right, and
it can't be that.
Well, James, I don't personally notice too much of it in Wandsworth. It's very multicultural, and
it's not. No, you're a member of the liberal elite, actually, living in Wandsworth.
Well, yes, perhaps. But
you've probably got foreigners living on your street, have you?
Of course.
Yeah, what do you know about the fear of What do you know about the valid concerns of people who've heard a plasterer claim he hasn't had a pay rise for 10 years and think it's conclusive proof that the country's full?
I know a little bit, in the sense that my husband's parents live in Swansea, and they live in a sort of an area of high unemployment, and it's very difficult out there. So I know that much, but I think it's a government.
Well, if we make all companies put the names of foreign workers on a big list, then unemployment in Swansea will disappear overnight. It's obvious.
Yeah, well, the skill set's not always there. I volunteer at the food bank in Wandsworth, and there's a young chap who came in who's got qualifications in dry lining, and he hasn't got the confidence to go out there and get a job. There are so many building sites around. He needs somebody to hold his hand and actually go and stand up at 6 o'clock in the line and try and get a job on the site. That could be part of the problem,
It could be part of the problem, but we're not going to solve it by making firms write all the names on a list. And I hate those things. I see those lines. It's like the dockers in the 20s in Liverpool, where you would not know until you got tapped on the shoulder by the foreman whether or not you were going to earn a crust that day. And we're seeing it again on the streets of Britain, and a lot of the people standing in those lines won't have been born here. But if you had strong trades unions, strong minimum wage and strong collective bargaining powers, they wouldn't exist. But if you are absolutely diametrically opposed to strong trades unions, high minimum wage, collective bargaining power for workers, what on earth do you make of the suggestion that immigrants are the real reason why workers are having a tough time of it? It's manna from heaven. Absolute manna from heaven. Just think about it. If you were very, very worried that there might be a movement abroad, I mean, afoot, not abroad. That's, of course, a controversial word these days. Didn't used to be. There's a movement afoot to call for all workers to get a pay rise. All of them. That would be worker versus boss, right? Roshani, thank you. I'm not expecting you to respond after this latest burble. Imagine if you were that boss, and the biggest fear you had was that we all ganged up together and came to ask for a pay rise. The only circumstances in which we're going to get a pay rise is if we're all on the same page. What would you say to a politician who was sowing division and hatred between that workforce? What would you say to a pundit or a columnist who was suggesting that the reason why you're getting paid so little is because of that Polish bloke on the next building site? That is just genius, isn't it? From the point of view of the boss who doesn't want to pay his staff more. But I ask you again, if you think that immigration drives down wages, why haven't the journalists of my acquaintance had a rise in the best part of 20 years? 0345 6060 973. Hugo's in Burwash. Hugo, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. No, you asked a moment, you mentioned the other moment ago that your driver this morning was from Slovakia.
Serbia.
Your manager, or Serbia, great country. and your manager comes from America. Now, why isn't it a British person doing your driving? Funny enough, I actually do drive for my living, and I work bloody hard. I work extremely hard.
So did my father-in-law, for the record, just in case anybody thinks I'm back in my liberal elite bubble. I know what it's like to drive for a living.
Yeah, why is it that we have to bring in these people from Eastern Europe? I have no problem with that. If they're willing to work, fine, brilliant. Why are they taking the jobs that British people don't? Is that because...
I don't even think that's true. I'd stop you there. I don't think there are huge swathes of people who dream of driving me around in the morning but can't because they're British, or don't because they're British. I just think it's the ebb and flow of humanity. It's tides that come and tides that go. This is a great country to be in for some reasons. Economic at the moment. They're probably going to get worse soon. So people come here looking to earn a crust, to live the dream.
Why is it that... why do they have to? Are there not enough people over here who are quite capable of doing it? Whenever I went into the petrol station on the airport yesterday morning, an absolutely charming Polish girl working behind the counter, and I said to her, which country do you come from? And she said, Poland. And I said, I said to her, you're very welcome over here. Now, I go into petrol stations where there's an English person behind the counter, and they,
I don't like. I mean, listen, you're describing something that happened to you, but I don't like the sweeping generalisations about building workers being underpriced by anecdotal plasterers, and I don't equally like the generalisations that all British workers or young British people are sort of surly and won't meet your eye. But that was your experience, and it is part of the answer to the question of why you prefer doing business with the Polish girl behind the counter than perhaps the British kid at the other petrol station. It's not going to be the chapter and verse answer to this question, but it is going to be a personal one, and that maybe is part of it. What is wrong with me and Hugo? Why don't we feel some sort of sense of revulsion when we note that the lady who's giving us our change in a petrol station is Polish? Is anyone prepared to admit that they do? Or are we still pretending that this conversation is about anything other than xenophobia and racism? Oh, it's about protecting British workers. What do you feel when you get your change off a Polish girl? Dirty? Insulted? Soiled? Exploited? Undercut? Overcome? Overrun? 0345 6060 973. Companies will be forced to reveal how many foreign workers they employ under government plans, and here's the line in the Times, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who had dinner with Theresa May last week in New York, to shame bosses who fail to take on British staff. Make no mistake, that word shame. You hire a foreigner, that is something to be ashamed of. Could you even begin to tell me why? Even if you thought, before you turned this radio programme on half an hour ago, that this might be quite a good idea. If you still do, I can't help you. You're down the rabbit hole. Why would I be ashamed of employing Steve Jobs, Syrian refugee, Boris Johnson, born in America, Mrs. Nigel Farage, born in Germany? Why should I be ashamed of hiring any of those people? My great-granddad. Why should I be ashamed of hiring them? Why would it be something to be shamed for? I am wondering, with a mixture of confusion and contempt, if I'm honest with you, why people in my profession, which has not seen pay rises across the board for the best part of 2 decades, pretend to believe that people in other professions are having their wages driven down by immigration. Just sort of noticed this morning, turned to a colleague. So when did we last get an increase? If you do a shift over there, how much do you get? What did you get 15 years ago? We don't think that the wages have gone up since 2004. That's the best estimate. Checked out some newspaper comparisons as well. When I started on the Daily Express in the mid-90s, I was on 16.5 grand for a 3-day week. Now, I'll be looking at about 5 grand more than that for a 5-day week. Entry level. So it hasn't gone up at all. And yet people in my profession claim that your wages have gone down because of immigration, while completely ignoring the people sitting next to them, the younger people, the less advanced people, career-wise. All you have to do is turn to the person sitting next to you and say, what's happened to your wages over the last 20 years? Well, let's compare them to where mine were when I started out. Public sector pay freeze, right across the board. Every single public sector worker has had a pay freeze now for years. That's imposed by government. But your wages have gone down, you must blame an immigrant. I don't blame you for blaming them. I really don't. I think I would if the roles were reversed. If the amount of effort that's put into persuading me to hold Stanislav responsible for the fact that I'm not getting a pay rise this year. The amount of effort that's put into it is almost irresistible. But ask yourself who's putting the effort in. Two types of people. People who benefit materially from the lie, i.e. because it prevents them from having to pay people more. You keep blaming it on immigration. The boss is laughing all the way to Barbados. And then people who benefit professionally, the professional sellers of tickets for the ghost train, who are having a right old time at the moment, aren't they? It's almost like they're competing with each other to see who can say the most hateful thing next. Where do we go next? Once we've said that we're happy to see refugees die, it's after that.
Seriously, it's like the worst game of top trumps imaginable. Top trumps of toxicity is what approximately 40% of the British media has become. And who loses? Absolutely everybody, including me and including you. Why are we letting this happen? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. And then, of course, we'll move on to infrastructure, and someone will tell me that we're all doctors and schools and we can't cope. And I'll point out that the patient satisfaction survey of the National Health Service was the highest it has ever been in 2010, and that the decision not to build enough houses to meet demand is again a decision taken by government. But hey, let's all blame Stanislav. Let's all blame Magda. Let's blame Judith. Let's blame Ranjit. Let's blame Jean-Pierre. Let's not blame Rupert Murdoch, whatever we do, or Theresa May or David Cameron. Let's not blame anybody who's actually got the power to change things. Let's just blame that bloke driving a bus. He's the reason why you haven't had a pay rise. How do you know that? Because journalists keep telling you. How do journalists know that? They don't, because if they asked the people sitting next to them what's happened to their wages over the last 20 years, they'd realise that wage reduction, wage compression, worker exploitation is happening in their own office. But they don't care. They want you to blame Stanislav. Or indeed Roman, who's embarking. Roman, what would you like to say?
Yes, hello, good morning.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, it was very interesting the way you started the show, but you pointed out very interesting that it's, and I was well thinking that it's a witch hunt against European immigrations at the moment. Who will be next? And regarding the wages, it's just I don't think it's immigration, maybe partially to blame as well, but they should concentrate more on the big companies and demanding, like you mentioned before, unions and everything to raise the wages, because it's the company's responsibility to look after their workers, and obviously if they can't pay more, I don't think so it's immigration to blame, be honest with you.
Well, no, because you've thought about it, but it's not. And this is where the Prime Minister later today will double down on the division and the toxicity by claiming that pointing out that it's not immigration means that you are somehow sneering at the people who've been persuaded that it is. Concerns about immigration are portrayed as parochial by the liberal elite. They find patriotism distasteful. I don't know anyone who finds patriotism distasteful. But as Edith Cavell, the First World War nurse, famously observed, it's not enough. You also have to pledge not to hate anybody. So what ways, or in what ways, has your life changed at all in the last few months, in the last year?
Yes, it changed in the last few months, to be honest, because especially after Brexit vote, the government didn't expect it to win. And when Brexiters won the vote, it's changed completely. You could feel tense in the air. You walk in the English shop, and you feel that straight away. And I think it's a shame, it's disgusting, because it shouldn't be like that. At the end of the day, we're all trying to make a living and feed our families. And, if you are better in doing the job and employer takes you, then, and if you're short of that qualities and, you can't get the job, go get the training then, put a little bit extra more effort.
See, you're sneering.
No, I'm just, honestly.
Sneerer. Roman is a sneerer. Stop sneering, Roman, by suggesting that if someone has come to this country and doesn't have English as a first language, or any education in the English system, or any work at all, or any contacts, and they're doing better than you in the workplace, stop suggesting that it might be their fault. It's obviously the fault of immigration, and the system is stacked against them, and we want our country back from people like you, Roman.
Well, this is the government trying to tell the people that immigration to blame. I don't see that. It's just a really, really wild card they're playing, because in the end of the day, we don't want to be negative, and if our neighbor is a foreigner, I don't mind, honestly. It's just as long, he's following the rules of this country and behaving, and,
I've started playing a game. Roman, you state the obvious, but of course that will be portrayed as sneering now by the Prime Minister. I play a game now. I was walking through Hammersmith yesterday, which is a pointless phrase to me, multicultural. It's the only London I've ever known. What I mean by multicultural is there were lots of different coloured people around, and some of them were wearing headscarves and some of them weren't. Most of them weren't. I saw a couple of women in the full face veil, which, as I've said many times in the past, I really don't like. And I sometimes, and this is going to sound so patronising, but hey, we're down the rabbit hole. I try to imagine what it is that these people feel, who feel uncomfortable that people are talking foreign on a train. What am I supposed to feel? Am I supposed to balk at skin colour? Am I supposed to balk at Roman's accent? Do I go, oh God, Roman with his accent? Where does that end? Discrimination against people from Somerset? They've got strong accents. I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to feel. I really don't. And that's why I think all of the right-on attempts by people like me to frame this debate in a way that doesn't invite racism accusations have failed. Because what is it you feel when you hear an accent like Roman's, or you see a skin colour that's not the same as yours? You have a negative reaction to that experience. What are we going to call that if we're not going to call it racism? You should be ashamed if you hire a foreigner, the Prime Minister will say later today. I beg your pardon, that was unveiled by the Home Secretary yesterday. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. So Jeremy Hunt's wife is Japanese, right? So he should be ashamed for marrying a foreigner. We need to write that down. There are plenty of British women that could have married Jeremy Hunt. It's not necessarily a fate I'd wish on anybody, but there are plenty of British women who could have done. He incidentally spent 2 years living in Japan after graduating from Oxford University, where his education would have been subsidised by the state, but he thinks that doctors who have their education subsidised by the state should be prevented from moving overseas to work. So you've got Jeremy Hunt's wife, Boris Johnson, born in America, Turkish grandfather. Theresa May should be ashamed of hiring Boris Johnson. Weren't there any British-born buffoons that she could have put in the cabinet instead of him? There must have been some British-born buffoons that she could have hired ahead of Boris Johnson. She was born in America, for God's sake. She should be ashamed of hiring him. Ian Duncan Smith, hasn't he got a Japanese grandmother? Couldn't we have found somebody who didn't have a Japanese grandmother to do that job? Wouldn't that have been easier? Mr. Farage over in America, spewing his bile to a whole new population. He's married to a bloody German. Couldn't he have found a proper British woman to marry? Hey? What's going on with these people? They should be ashamed of their association with foreigners. That's just off the top of my head. Give me a name of a politician. Go on, give me another one. See if we can come up with a... Who else is in... I don't know enough about Amber Rudd. I've been reading a lot about her troubled business past rather than her personal life. That's the problem, isn't it, at the moment? In the front line, they're all too new for us to know much about. But the Times newspaper, owned by a naturalised American who revoked his Australian citizenship and owns most of the British media, is suggesting that hiring a foreigner is something that a British firm should be shamed for doing. I'll just say that again in case you think this is satire. A newspaper owned by a man who revoked his Australian citizenship to take advantage of the tax arrangements in his new country of America owns a newspaper whose front page praises effectively today an announcement by the Home Secretary that invokes the word shame when describing companies that employ foreign workers. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's the satirists I feel sorry for. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I forgot about Juan. I can't believe it. I talked you through what my morning had been like, how I had a Serbian driver this morning. I took a phone call from my American business manager. I walked past the West Indian security guard on the front desk, waved to my friend, the Muslim, who sits behind reception. I forgot all about Juan, who's just been in to polish the studio. And do you know what he was wearing? He was wearing a little post-it note on his chest that says Colombian on it. So presumably this place is ashamed that Juan is cleaning the studios today, because that's the country that we're creating. And don't forget, it's journalists who are telling you that your wages are being driven down by immigration, despite the fact they're sitting next to other journalists who haven't had a pay rise for 20 years. I think we'll continue contemplating the speech that the Prime Minister is due to make and the speech that the Home Secretary did make. It's the latter that prompted the Times newspaper, remember, owned by an ex-Australian, now domiciled in America for tax reasons and the owner of more British media than any other man in the history of this country, that companies who employ foreign workers must be shamed for failing to take on British staff. And just a sort of polite contemplation of how the hell we've allowed things to go so nuts. I'm not taking any blame. I've never been more dismayed by the fact that I predicted this almost to the letter in a book that I wrote about a year ago. I said, if you don't lance this boil, this will happen. you don't actually stop people getting away with the claim that these concerns are valid when most of the time they're not, then there's no way you can control it. It's like herding cats, and that's how we've ended up where we are today, wondering how the hell we're supposed to distinguish between a firm that's been shamed for employing foreign workers and a firm that hasn't. And I just talked you through my own morning where, almost everybody I encountered could be construed as being of foreign extraction. And I don't understand the mindset of people who would be bothered by that. I just don't get it. And I've tried, I think probably wrongly, this is the sort of touchy-feely naivety that I suffer from. Probably wrongly, I've tried to find lots and lots of reasons that don't look like racism, or xenophobia at least. So why, when I hear an accent on a bus from a bus driver, nothing inside me reacts in a way that's different from how it would if it were a Cockney accent, in the same way that if you happen to have brown skin, I don't react differently to you or see you differently from how I would if you had white skin. And I don't understand what happens inside people who do think, oh, they're all talking foreign on this train. I mean, if it's not xenophobia, what is it? Oh, they're taking away our culture. No, the only person in charge of your culture is you. You want to protect British culture, go and read a play. Buy a book. Go to the library. You want to protect British culture does not involve fire-bombing sausage shops because they've got Polski written on the outside, or daubing graffiti on the Polish Cultural Centre that I walk past every day in Hammersmith. How is that protecting British culture? Unless, of course, British culture is yobbish, which I passionately believe it isn't. Because I also recognise what patriotism is in the context of a country that is warm, welcoming and beautiful, not in the context of a country that asks you to wear a special badge if you were born somewhere else, either metaphorical or actual. Chances of me getting an interview with Amber Rudd or Theresa May in the near future are slimmer than slim, slimmer than zero, slimmer than nil. But if you get a chance, just ask them a couple of simple questions. Jeremy Hunt's wife, Boris Johnson, born abroad. Does Theresa May have to publish the list of all the people born abroad in her government? Or all the people married to people who were born? It's just insane. And yet, the appetite she's feeding is real. My problem has always been that once you acknowledge the appetite and start feeding it, it will never be sated. It will never be satisfied. You will never, ever be able to assuage the unhappiness of people who think that their problems are caused by immigrants for the very simple reason that they're not. And if you think I'm lying, look at my profession. This is the profession that is responsible for telling you that your wages have been driven down by immigrants. No one else has done it. Self-publicising politicians and journalists and commentators. That's who does it. We are the people who have told you that your wages have been driven down by immigration. And yet in my profession, I sit next to people who haven't had a pay rise for the best part of 20 years. I don't understand. People who do what I do for a living, I don't understand how they can be unaware of that. If I sat here now and told you that your wages have been driven down because of immigration, and I can prove it, because look, here's a plasterer who's not getting paid as much as he was 15 years ago. How can I not add? How much would I have to hold you in contempt not to add that the same is true in my profession? And I don't think that's got anything to do with immigration. It's I get the showbiz side of it. I know that it sells tickets. But if I sat here now and tried to persuade you to hate on immigrants or to hate on immigration because your wages are low, and I didn't tell you that the same thing had happened to my own profession, what would that make me? It's worse than a hypocrite, right? Because the damage that's done by the belief that your wages are low because of immigration is precisely the sort of damage that leads to the incidents that I described to you a moment ago, the hate crimes. There's one filmed in Northern Ireland today, some teenage boys abusing I think the woman's Romanian, but she's not a girl. They say to her, you're not a girl, you're an immigrant. If I sat here now and persuaded you that your wages are low because of immigration without acknowledging that the same is true for teachers, for doctors, for all these professions and jobs that don't have a particularly high proportion of immigrants doing them. Journalism is the one example I'm not going to give up on. This job here, now, my colleagues, day rate as freelance journalists is roughly what it was in 2004. So for me to sit here now and say to you that your wages have been driven down by immigration, when I know for a fact that the people sitting next to me, opposite me and behind me haven't had a pay rise for the best part of a decade and a half, and it has nothing to do with immigration, does that make me dishonest? Or something altogether more sinister? What's next? Burning books, do you think? We're going to do that next? Start burning books? Calling for journalists to be silenced? What's that? We've already done that. Oh. Well, what's next then? Rosie's in Sheen. Rosie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. It's my first time calling. Just my first point is just to confirm what you've just been saying. My husband is in the media industry. He's a TV editor, and he's been working as a TV editor for 20 years, and he has never had an increase since he started his job. In fairness, he doesn't earn like peanuts, but he has never been able to actually say, on this job, I'm going to increase my pay rise. I'm going to ask for more, because it's not acceptable. They just paid what they're paid, and
yes.
And he's British. So that's one first point I wanted to make.
It's a really important. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's so important, this, isn't it? Because it is journalists who are responsible for persuading people in the building trade or elsewhere that their wages have been driven down by immigration, and yet in our profession, wages have been frozen, as you say, for 20 years. It's a calumny of epic proportions. It's one of the most egregious examples of deliberate and divisive dishonesty that I can think of.
Yeah, my husband is very aware of that. He always says, oh my gosh, I can't believe in 20 years I haven't actually been able to increase my rate, my hourly rate. And the times he tried, and people go like, oh no, but this is not the...
Only time you get a pay rise in our business is if someone else wants to hire you, and you can go back to your boss and say, well, look, they want me, so
exactly,
you make me an offer.
Exactly. But so that was my first point, just in confirm what you're saying there. The second point is I am an immigrant, and the first time I came here was about 20 years ago.
Hang on, just stop, Rosie. I just pause for a minute. Caroline, can we start making a list of all the people who ring in who are immigrants, please, and then we will publish it on the door of the studio at the end of the programme, so that we get shamed on this programme, and my colleagues who don't take calls from immigrants, they can get all the promotions and the pay rises. Carry on, Rosie. I hope you didn't hear any of that.
No, that's okay. I pretend I didn't know.
Thank you.
Then I decided to just, because I came here to just improve my English. I couldn't speak English very well, and I thought, okay, I have to pay my way of living. So I went to Queens, where, Bayswater, where it's full of hotels, and I literally went knocking in every single hotel. Do you need someone to work? Do you need someone to work? And then when I knocked on I think it was my 6th or 7th hotel, they said, yeah, we actually need. When can you start? And I said, well, I can start tomorrow. And that was it. Literally, I signed the contract, and I couldn't speak English very well, but I had the willingness to work, and I needed the money to pay my way. So I got a job, and then after that job, I got another job. And yes, it wasn't an easy job. I had to be there very early. It didn't pay very much, but it was a job that started me off in this country. And my third point is, now I've been here for 21 years. My children were born here, so they are British. My husband is British. And my daughter has just finished her A-levels and decided to take a gap year and defer her university place until next year. So she's going to go to abroad to work on a charity for about 8 months and so on. But she's only going to go in November.
Working for a charity, liberal elite, ridiculous.
Yeah, no, she wants to do psychology. So working for this charity will help her with her psychology degree when she goes back, because it's working with children and young people who suffered accidents and have to go back into the community, have to go back into the work environment looking differently. So once the surgical procedures have gone well and they're physically treated, now they have to help them to go back into the community, working as, accepting the way they look. That is in Brazil, that is, the Amazon. They've got the people who live next to the rivers.
You're covering a lot of ground in this call, Rosie. I'm loving every minute of it.
I'm going off. It's just because it's such an interesting charity.
Isn't it? Absolutely.
But my point about but my daughter is the fact that she then is going to go abroad in November. So when she finished her A-levels in the end of August, she decided, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to make some money, so I've got some money to spend in there. And she went online on a Thursday, and then she got a job. They just said to her, can you come for an interview on Monday? And she went, yeah. So she went on Monday, and she started working on Tuesday. She's working in events, when you're just serving people and stuff like that. But she's making her money. And she, on Thursday evening, we sat down having dinner, and she said to me, Mommy, I can't understand why people say they can't find jobs. because you literally, there is so much out there. And I said, I don't understand either.
If you're mobile and you're near a big population, you're in Sheen, then you have a point. I mean, you can walk through central London and you walk through Bayswater and you'll see signs in many, many windows. But if you're out in the sticks, I mean, there is geography that's relevant to this, and an awful lot of people who are unemployed don't have a street within walking distance that has signs in the window. And you see what I used to do, Rosie. I don't know if you were listening a few years ago. I used to, because I'm a member of the liberal elite, I used to defend young British people from right-wing journalists who were describing them all as feckless workshy layabouts who could easily get a job if they wanted one. And now I'm defending I suppose people like your daughter from the accusation that they're stealing jobs from the feckless workshop. It's incredible. I mean, it's almost as if people are blind to how vilely they're being conned.
Yeah, but I agree with you, because I think the location where you are is very important.
Yes.
However, in London, I'm just talking about my own experience.
Exactly that, and I need to remind. I'm just reminding you that outside of the big cities, and indeed outside of the big cities that are booming, as it were, the picture can be quite different. And I'm Rosie, thank you. I'm a little late for the travel because I'm also reflecting upon the irony of it being the liberal elite that spoke up for unemployed young British people who genuinely couldn't find work, who are now, of course, speaking up for the immigrants. So the people who used to demonise the unemployed young British people are now demonising instead. Oh man, it's so obvious and so clear. There are times when I know exactly what that little lad felt like, where everyone else was cheering the Emperor's wonderful new clothes and all he could see was a bare bum. Listen to the way politicians and commentators talk about the public. They find their patriotism distasteful, concerns about immigration parochial, views about crime illiberal, and the fact that 17 million voted to leave the EU bewildering. So Theresa May at least giving up on the pretense that Brexit and immigration are not inextricably linked, despite the attempt of some people. Well, she was supposed to be on the Remain side as well, wasn't she? It's almost comical, actually, that reflection. That's what she's due to say imminently. We will take as much of her speech as we can, actually. I think it's partly up to you how much of it we take. But that she knows clearly what stall she is laying out. And it's the stall that says if you've got concerns about immigration, you need to be listened to. The problem is that when you do listen to the massive majority of concerns about immigration, they don't actually stand up to scrutiny. For example, it drives down wages, journalists will tell you. And then someone will come on to prove that this is true by revealing that they haven't had a pay rise for 20 years. Working usually on a building site is the most popular patronising case study. But what those journalists never tell you is that none of their colleagues have had a pay rise for 20 years either. So it can't be immigration that's doing it. But of course, if you're a journalist that's in the pocket of a plutocrat or a media baron, then you don't want people to realise the truth, because it's the plutocrats who are responsible for low wages, not the Poles. I don't want to sound, let me check, I don't want to sound as if I'm finding your patriotism distasteful, but how can anybody not see that? Here's a Polish bloke earning a crust, same that you're earning, same wage that you're offered. Here's the boss who chooses how much to pay you both. Whose fault is it that you get paid what you get paid? Bloke standing next to you with his sandwiches, or the boss writing the checks? It's just insane. But if we fetishise bosses, I see it in this profession. I always thought journalism was designed to cock a snook at the authorities, to be the one that questions the status quo. The government changes, journalism shouldn't. You always, it's like Paxman's line about, I want to know why they're lying to me. Is so powerful. Maybe a little unfashionable now, but generally speaking, my profession would hold politicians to account. Now, most of my profession does the work for them. For the billionaire media owners, newspaper owners specifically, the billionaire newspaper owners and the right-wing politicians. Because if we actually mobilised on the real problems and the real causes of the real problems, they'd be in all sorts of trouble. Oh, look, over there's an immigrant. Don't talk about bankers. You can probably list them, the columnists who go down these lines. The patronisers on a daily basis. Oh, don't bash the bankers. Bash the cleaners? Okay, all right, yeah, down with cleaners. Down with bus drivers. Up with bankers? Okay. And they're doing it, and they're feeding it, and we swallow it. Because it's so unrelenting, it's so unleavened. And where does it lead? It leads to this front page. Companies will be forced to reveal how many foreign workers they employ under government plans to shame bosses who fail to take on British staff. But don't take my word for it. I live in a bubble. I live in a complete, isolated bubble, i.e. city that has some of the highest immigration levels in the world. Big bubble. No idea what immigration's really like. I was going to wear a little camera on the walk home one day, just because I wonder what it is. I'm not talking about the box of trolls now. I'm talking about decent people. People who would rather feel better about life than they currently do. Not people who need to feel angry because it's all they've got left. People who need the fear. But normal people who would rather feel happier, who would rather not be living in fear of immigration, who would rather not be living in fear of invasion. And almost all of them will live in areas where there isn't any, or there's very, very little. So one Polish shop opens, it's like the end of the world. 30 Polish shops open, you've never known any different. Chinatown, who gets upset about Chinatown? Every town in Kidderminster, where I grew up, my first teacher at reception, her dad was an Italian immigrant who had opened a little deli. And no one got upset about that, except they did get upset about that. And they were told to shut up and get over it. Soon as we started buying the nonsense that political correctness had gone mad, we opened the door to this. And I don't think we can shut the door. I have no idea how you shut the door. When you have a Home Secretary calling upon companies to reveal how many foreign workers they employ. How do you close that door? Rebecca's in Horsham. Rebecca, what would you like to say?
Hello. I don't really know where to start.
Nor do I, but we're an hour and a half in, so something's going all right.
My husband woke up this morning and saw that headline in the Times and just looked at me and said, I don't feel welcome here anymore.
Oh, Lord.
He's Dutch. He's been here for 15 years. He's an airline pilot for a well-known company. Speaks amazing English. He learned to fly in America, so he's got an American-y twang.
Sure. A lot of Dutch people do, don't they, actually?
But people say, I've actually had people say to me, oh, but it doesn't matter about it doesn't include your husband.
We don't mean him. We don't mean him.
No, he's Dutch. They speak amazing English. It's fine. I think that's just insane, because it does include him, and he does see those papers and reads that.
Yeah.
And I'm a primary school teacher. I haven't had a pay rise. I don't look at my husband and go, it's your fault. I'm blaming you. It's just I don't know. I can't even quantify it. Because they're Polish and they're not Dutch. That's perhaps I don't even know where to.
It's good foreign and bad foreign, I think. Just like there's good poor and bad poor, there's deserving poor and undeserving poor. We don't mean you. And quite often, the people who are most spooked by immigration will be like the people you describe, and they just don't know anybody who is the bad kind of foreigner. The bad kind of foreigner is the one that you find in the pages of the Daily Mail. The bad kind of foreigner is the one that you hear about when people ring my show to lie about prayer rooms in their schools or queues at their supermarkets. I mean, actually busting people stone cold on the radio for lying because they have to back up their claim that immigration is out of control, and they can't. They're not talking about real people most of the time. Mm-hmm. They look at your husband and think, oh, no, not him. I mean, them there in the Daily Express, them. That's who they mean, isn't it? There's a faceless them.
Yeah, but it actually has actual quantifiable reaction to it, and it's awful. And my dad is so worried about it. I think he's going to have a heart attack. I genuinely worry for him. He can't take it. Every day there's something going on. My grandfather was Polish. We're like a multicultural family. My husband speaks Dutch to my boys. We want to bring them up bilingual because
of course, it's useful. It's good to speak two languages.
And he says, we should have to change it to English. It's just, I don't know. He's worried. He doesn't want to be here anymore. Let's look for another job. Let's go somewhere else. And I don't want to. This is my country. This is where I live, and I'm bringing up my boys here, and that's my...
Well, I can provide you with a place to vent. I can't provide you with much else at the moment, except some company, Rebecca.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I don't even know. I don't.
It's all right. It will out. I mean, the next thing that has to happen, or ideally, would be that lots and lots of people who voted to leave the European Union object furiously to Theresa May's suggestion that it is somehow linked to distaste about immigration or unhappiness about immigration. The intellectual wing, that all of those people who voted to leave who aren't remotely racist will be outraged by the suggestion that foreign workers should be put on lists. People like your husband, people like Mr Farage's wife should be put on lists of foreign workers. And for Theresa May to link that to the European Union is disingenuous. And presumably all the people who voted to leave and don't have a racist bone in their body will be outraged by this conflation, and they'll be the first to man the barricades and insist that such ludicrous legislation is not brought in. I would advise you not to hold your breath, Rebecca. It's coming up to 11:30. That speech could well be on the way. You could hear Theresa May's voice before you next hear mine. I'm not sure yet. It depends upon the schedule in Birmingham. But after that, we'll be back to more of your calls. I'm keeping a close eye on events in Birmingham, where the Prime Minister, Theresa May, is about to deliver a speech that appears to have been designed to delight the editor of the Daily Mail. She will say, "Listen to the way politicians and commentators talk about the public. They find their patriotism distasteful, concerns about immigration parochial, views about crime illiberal, and the fact that 17 million voted to leave the EU bewildering." Go back in time to some other newspapers owned by the then Lord Rothermere, and you could find the one that offered 500 seats for a British Union of Fascists rally as a prize at the Royal Albert Hall for readers who sent in the most convincing reasons why they liked the black shirts. Another Rothermere title, Sunday Dispatch, even sponsored a black shirt beauty competition to find the most attractive British Union of Fascists supporters. Sounds a bit like Donald Trump, that, doesn't it? And this is from William Joyce, who was the co-founder, of course, of the British Union of Fascists with Oswald Mosley. In his speech at, I think in Brighton, January 1934, he pledged to free British industry from foreigners. Would you like a quote from that speech? He promised to free British industry from foreigners. You just heard a quote from Amber Rudd on our news about making sure companies are doing enough to make sure jobs are going to the British people, freeing, she didn't say, British industry from foreigners. William Joyce added, "Be they Hebrew or any other form of alien." 25 minutes to 12 is the time. I reserve the right to violently rip your attention away from the next caller and towards the Conservative Conference Hall in Birmingham, but we won't do that immediately. Shaquille is in Derby. Shaquille, what made you pick up the phone? I think I bored him to death, haven't I? Let's go to Gaga, who's in Crawley. Gaga, what would you like to say?
Hello there. I come in this country 8 years ago, and my first job was in a car wash. Yeah, and there was a lady, and every day when she passed us, she say, you nick our jobs, you take the jobs, bloody immigrants and all these things. And then in one day, I was in a bad mood, and I asked her, all right, do you want this job? I can speak with my manager, and he can give you this job. No, I will never do this kind of job. Say, oh, okay, that's fine then. So why you still moaning about we take your jobs here in this country? And my second point, after that job, I worked in a supermarket, and she was an English lady. She worked only 20 hours per week. And I asked her, why you don't ask for 39 hours a week, because they have a full-time contract available for you? She said, no, because then I'll lose my tax credit or something like that.
Which is, I think, a situation that's being addressed. But you see, this is where I have to patronise you a bit, Gaga, and I apologise for that, because because we can't. If you then start going down the benefits blame route, you're kind of doing the work that the people who today are blaming immigrants for everything that's wrong in their lives. Yesterday they were blaming people on benefits. So, so for poor old pussy-footed liberals like me in the liberal elite, I have to stick up for the unemployed people, and then I have to stick up for you. So if you turn on each other, then I've got a whole heap of problems I don't need.
And about the skills, when you spoke about they need more training or something like that, and when I come in this country, I didn't have any skills. At the moment, I'm a HGV driver, but in this country, I done my category B license and category C as well. So you need, at least, if the company doesn't spend any money on you for the training, at least you have to do it yourself if you want a higher salary.
Working hard, getting qualifications, paying tax. Earning a living. What exactly should your employer be ashamed of, do you think, for hiring you instead of Trevor over there?
To be fair, in this company, I'm the only Romanian HGV driver.
Have you got a badge yet?
Not yet, no. But I think I'll get one when I'll go back. And we have some Polish forklift drivers. So, but we are all colleagues. You know what I mean? That doesn't matter which background you come from. If you do your job, and you go home, you know what I mean?
I think in most workplaces that's true. It's this notion of the faceless other. So you'll have colleagues who think immigration is out of control, but they don't mean you, they would say. And they really don't. They mean the other people, the ones that are taking all the school places and the GPs appoint, not you, but the ones without faces and names. And kind of the politics of othering, and it's gone mainstream. It's gone completely mainstream. It's reached Downing Street. 11:38 is the time, keeping an eye on that podium in Birmingham, waiting for the Prime Minister to speak. Before that, Eileen is in Uxbridge. Eileen, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Well, do you know what? I think in some ways this is a monster we've created ourselves.
Too right.
I work in the dementia field, and I have done for the last 10 years. And the one thing I do come across is a lot of care problems where people have carers in their home. And having seen it firsthand in our own family, the issues we've had with bad care, unfortunately, have been with British staff. Laziness, signing timesheets for an hour when they've done 20 minutes, not wanting to clean a patient properly, whereas the carers that have either come from a Polish background or Eastern European background and further afield, particularly Somalians, have been wonderful carers. They seem to be diligent, their timekeeping's immaculate. They haven't got issues with, getting drunk, boyfriends chucking them so they can't.
Listen, I'm an enemy of generalisations, but I'm equally a fan of first-hand experiences. So you are providing first-hand experiences, just as a plasterer who rings me and tells me that he hasn't had a pay rise for 15 years is also providing a first-hand experience. My professional responsibility is to remind him that journalists haven't either, so it may not necessarily be a result of immigration. Should the employers of these carers be ashamed? Should they have to publish lists of how many foreign workers they've got?
No, I don't think so. I think you have to go with the facts at the end of the day.
No, you can't go with facts. Facts are even more unfashionable than dealy boppers and loom pants at the moment, Eileen.
Yeah, that's so true. But unfortunately, when I'm seeing it day in, day out, and I know it sounds like I'm generalising because there's loads of fantastic British carers out there. I know that.
I'm glad you've acknowledged that.
I do think that the facts are there. It's the longevity as well. If someone can't stay in the job because, i.e., they don't want to do a 12-hour shift in a coffee shop or whatever, and I see it with my own friends' children. They're all of that age now where they're leaving university and wanting jobs, and they want the best of everything. They don't want to do what we did 20, 30 years ago where we started at the bottom. They want easy jobs, and I really do think that is a problem in our country. We've created a lazy workforce, and as a result, everybody else who wants to do the work has cashed in on that. So you can't really complain about it if the evidence is there to say that unfortunately foreigners perhaps can do a better job than some of the British people.
This is the other message that doesn't seem to be reaching the population, although it's beginning to. What are these jobs that you think that our children should be doing? If you were a prominent Leave campaigner and you were talking about too many foreigners doing these jobs and we need to cut it, I mean, Andrea Leadsom at least had the honesty, perhaps didn't realise what she was doing, to say that our children should be going out picking potatoes and picking fruit. And you're now reminding us that the jobs that have been taken often by immigrants involve wiping the bottoms of geriatric dementia patients. That's what Andrea Leadsom thinks our children should be doing.
Well, this is it.
Nothing wrong with that kind of work, but I don't think it's quite the brave new world that these people had in mind when politicians were telling them we need to shut the door on the people currently doing these jobs.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the problem, isn't it? That we've almost made, I think, the immigrants sort of like the working class, and the English youth that are growing into jobs now, the middle class, because it's almost like in my day, it was the rich that became solicitors and accountants. Whereas now, anyone can become a solicitor and accountant if you get into university and you work hard. Whereas now, I think, the bottom line jobs, our children are kind of thinking, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to work in a coffee shop.
What am I going to do? What am I going to do? That becomes the problem. And you need to be fed by politicians. The notion that your inability to find something you want to do is not their fault. So you blame it on the people we've been speaking to today. It's 11:42. Eileen, thank you very much. There is some good news of sorts. I mentioned to you a moment ago the story of the Romanian woman being abused horribly in County Antrim in Northern Ireland. There's footage of it, but I mean, you can find it yourself. I know it's all about clicks these days, and I'm a big fan of that as well. I think 1.5 million for my latest, but I don't know if it was my mum who had been abused like this, I wouldn't be comfortable with the footage of it going viral, or my daughter. They've found the kids responsible. They started throwing stones and abusing a woman in the street, and when she asked why they don't respect women, why they don't respect girls, they replied, "You are not a girl, you are an immigrant, and you shouldn't be in this country." And the mother of one of the boys has now taken to Facebook to express her shame and reveal that she's marched him around to the victim's house to apologise. And listen to this. I also went and visited the lady and her family to apologise for what happened. They are such lovely people, and I can't imagine the fear that they put into her. They were even nice to my son and explained to him how wrong he was. She She assured people that her son would be dealt with by the police and by ourselves. That, to me, is British values. I know that's a slightly hackneyed phrase that really is very much in the ear of the beholder, but that's what my mum would have done with me, not that she would have ever had to. And the fact that they were nice to the boy who'd abused them because they give him the benefit of the doubt. They know that he is not the purveyor of poison and lies. He is a consumer of poison and lies. And I don't know how you make that distinction. Increasingly, I don't know how you make that distinction, because the politicians want you to stop making that distinction. They want you to start treating the swallowers of poison and lies exactly the same as the purveyors of it. And I refuse to do that. Andy's in Horsham. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hi, how you doing? I'm a company director in London, and I'll be more than happy to publish how many migrant workers we've got with us. Because, to be honest, we would not be able to function as a business without the use of migrant workers. We've got people from Turkey, South Africa, Poland, Latvia. We've got British guys on board, but we work in the events industry, and the industry wouldn't function without foreign nationals. We just couldn't fill the jobs. The crew just aren't out there, and I think it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace that we left the EU in the first place.
When politicians say, as some have done both this week and prior to the referendum, that they don't mind sacrificing a bit of GDP if it means we can get control of our borders, they don't mind the British people being a bit worse off financially if it means there's fewer foreigners around, it's hard to work out what they mean by that. It's hard to actually turn those rhetorical flourishes into reality. The reality of comments like that is that they could live with seeing your company go under if it meant there were fewer foreigners in the country.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it does. I can't think of a better analysis.
Yeah, no, you're dead right. When we voted out of the EU, there were people that I was trying to get on board, really good qualified people that I got emails from saying, we don't feel comfortable here, we're going back home. And we were gutted, everyone was. My children were, the whole thing is a disgrace, and I think it's unrealistic, and it's going back in time.
What happens next, do you think? I mean, they don't deliver on these policies that are just designed to sort of feed a mob of meaningless hate. They don't deliver on the policies, or they do. I mean, what would you do if you had to publish that? You have to prove to me that you've tried hard to find a British employee before you hired that Belgian bloke. How are you going to do that?
All day long, because I've put adverts in, and I've had literally no British guys apply.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off in your prime, Andy, and Theresa May now makes her way to the stage, accompanied by the music of the Rolling Stones, I think.
Taking the waves of the crowd, she immediately gets a standing ovation. As Laura was saying there, she's not going to use the auto cue. Apparently she doesn't like that. She feels she speaks more normally and naturally, simply with a script in front of her. None of the Ed Miliband trying to memorize this speech. I think Mr. Miliband tried that twice, didn't work the second time. No one's going to try that again. So here she is, taking the applause of the Tory faithful. It's the first time they have seen her as Prime Minister in front of the full conference in the closing day of a Conservative Party conference. Let us hear the Prime Minister, Theresa May.
When we came to Birmingham this week, some big questions were hanging in the air. Do we have a plan for Brexit? We do. Are we ready for the effort it will take to see it through? We are. Can Boris Johnson stay on message for a full 4 days? Just about. But I know there's another big question people want me to answer. What's my vision for Britain? My philosophy? My approach? Today, I want to answer that question very directly. I want to set out my vision for Britain after Brexit. I want to lay out my approach, the things I believe. I want to explain what a country that works for everyone means. I want to set our party and our country on the path towards the new centre ground of British politics, built on the values of fairness and opportunity, where everyone plays by the same rules, and where every single person, regardless of their background or that of their parents, is given the chance to be all they want to be. And as I do so, I want to be clear about something else. That a vision is nothing without the determination to see it through. No vision ever built a business by itself. No vision ever clothed a family or fed a hungry child. No vision ever changed a country on its own. You need to put the hours in and the effort too. But but if you do, great things can happen. Great changes can occur. And be in no doubt, that's what Britain needs today. Because in June, people voted for change, and a change is going to come. Change. Change has got to come. Because as we leave the European Union and take control of our own destiny, the task of tackling some of Britain's long-standing challenges, like how to train enough people to do the jobs of the future, becomes ever more urgent. But change has got to come too, because of the quiet revolution that took place in our country just 3 months ago. A revolution in which millions of our fellow citizens stood up and said they were not prepared to be ignored anymore. Because this is a turning point for our country, a once-in-a-generation chance to change the direction of our nation for good, to step back and ask ourselves what kind of country we want to be. And let's be clear, we have come a long way over the past 6 years. We've brought the deficit down, got more people into work than ever before, taken the lowest paid out of income tax, established a new national living wage, helped nearly 1 million new businesses to set up and grow, got almost 1.5 million more children into good or outstanding schools, put record investment into the NHS, created nearly 3 million new apprenticeships, and brought crime down by more than a quarter to its lowest ever level. That's a record of which we should all be proud. And and this morning, it's right that we pause to say thank you to the man who made that possible. A man who challenged us to change and told us that if we did, we would win again. And he was right. We did change. We did win. The first majority Conservative government in almost 25 years. A great leader of our party, a great servant to our country. David Cameron, thank you. But now, we need to change again. For the referendum was not just a vote to withdraw from the EU. It was about something broader, something that the European Union had come to represent. It was about a sense, deep, profound, and, let's face it, often justified, that many people have today, that the world works well for a privileged few, but not for them. It was a vote not just to change Britain's relationship with the European Union, but to call for a change in the way our country works and the people for whom it works forever. Knock on almost any door in almost any part of the country, and you will find the roots of that revolution laid bare. Our society should work for everyone. But if you can't afford to get onto the property ladder, or your child is stuck in a bad school, it doesn't feel like it's working for you. Our economy should work for everyone. But if your pay has stagnated for several years in a row and fixed items of spending keep going up, it doesn't feel like it's working for you. Our democracy should work for everyone. But if you've been trying to say things need to change for years and your complaints fall on deaf ears, it doesn't feel like it's working for you. And the roots of the revolution run deep, because it wasn't the wealthy who made the biggest sacrifices after the financial crisis, but ordinary working-class families. And if you're one of those people who lost their job, who stayed in work but on reduced hours, took a pay cut as household bills rocketed, or, and I know a lot of people don't like to admit this, someone who finds themselves out of work or on lower wages because of low-skilled immigration, life simply doesn't seem fair. It feels like your dreams have been sacrificed in the service of others. So change has got to come. Because if we don't respond, if we don't take this opportunity to deliver the change people want, resentments will grow, divisions will become entrenched, and that would be a disaster for Britain. Because the lesson of Britain is that we are a country built on the bonds of family, community, citizenship, of strong institutions and a strong society. The country of my parents, who instilled in me a sense of public service, and of public servants everywhere who want to give something back. The parent who works hard all week but takes time out to coach the kids' football team at the weekend. The local family business in my constituency that's been serving the community for more than 50 years. The servicemen and women I met last week who wear their uniform proudly at home and serve our nation with honour abroad. A country... a country of decency, fairness, and quiet resolve. And a successful country, small in size but large in stature, that with less than 1% of the world's population boasts more Nobel laureates than any country outside the United States, with 3 more added again just yesterday, 2 of whom worked here in this great city. A country... a country that boasts 3 of the top 10 universities in the world's leading financial capital, and institutions like the NHS and the BBC, whose reputations echo in some of the farthest corners of the globe. All possible because we are one united kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And I will always fight to preserve our proud historic union, and will never let divisive nationalists drive us apart. Yet within our society today, we see division and unfairness all around, between a more prosperous older generation and a struggling younger generation, between the wealth of London and the rest of the country, but perhaps most of all, between the rich, the successful, and the powerful, and their fellow citizens. Now, don't get me wrong. We applaud success. We want people to get on. But we also value something else, the spirit of citizenship. That spirit that means you respect the bonds and obligations that make our society work. that means a commitment to the men and women who live around you, who work for you, who buy the goods and services you sell. That spirit that means recognizing the social contract that says you train up local young people before you take on cheap labor from overseas. That spirit that means you do as others do and pay your fair share of tax. But today, too many people in positions of power behave as though they have more in common with international elites than with the people down the road, the people they employ, the people they pass on the street. But if you believe you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere. You don't understand what the very word citizenship means. So if you're a boss who earns a fortune but doesn't look after your staff, an international company that treats tax laws as an optional extra, a household name that refuses to work with the authorities even to fight terrorism, a director who takes out massive dividends while knowing that the company pension is about to go bust. I'm putting you on warning. This can't go on anymore. A change has got to come, and this party is going to make it. So today, I want to set out my plans for a Britain where everyone plays by the same rules and every person has the opportunity to be all they want to be. It's a plan to tackle the unfairness and injustice that divides us, so that we may build a new united Britain, rooted in the centre ground. A plan that will mean government stepping up, righting wrongs, challenging vested interests, taking big decisions, doing what we believe to be right, getting the job done. Because that's the good that government can do, and it's what I'm in this for. To stand up for the weak and to stand up to the strong, and to put the power of government squarely at the service of ordinary working class people. Because too often, that isn't how it works today. Just listen to the way a lot of politicians and commentators talk about the public. They find your patriotism distasteful, your concerns about immigration parochial, your views about crime illiberal, your attachment to your job security inconvenient. They find the fact that more than 17 million voters decided to leave the European Union simply bewildering. Because if you're well off and comfortable, Britain is a different country, and these concerns are not your concerns. It's easy to dismiss them, easy to say that all you want from government is for it to get out of the way. But a change has got to come. It's time to remember the good that government can do. Time for a new approach that says, while government doesn't have all the answers, government can and should be a force for good. That the state exists to provide what individual people, communities and markets cannot, and that we should employ the power of government for the good of the people. Time to reject the ideological templates provided by the socialist left and the libertarian right, and to embrace a new centre ground in which government steps up and not back to act on behalf of us all. Providing security from crime, but from ill health and unemployment too. Supporting free markets, but stepping in to repair them when they aren't working as they should. Encouraging business and supporting free trade, but not accepting one set of rules for some and another for everyone else. And if we act to correct unfairness and injustice and put government at the service of ordinary working people, we can build that new united Britain in which everyone plays by the same rules and in which the powerful and the privileged no longer ignore the interests of the people. Only we can do it. Because the main lesson I take from the conference last week is that the Labour Party is not just divided, but divisive, determined to pit one against another, to pursue vendettas and settle scores, and to embrace the politics of pointless protest that simply pulls people further apart. That's what Labour stands for, fighting among themselves, abusing their own MPs, threatening to end their careers, tolerating anti-Semitism and supporting voices of hate. You know what some people call them? The Nasty Party. And with Labour divided, divisive and out of touch, we have a responsibility to step up, represent and govern for the whole nation. So where Labour build barriers, we will build bridges. That means tackling unfairness and injustice and shifting the balance of Britain decisively in favour of ordinary working-class people, giving them access to the opportunities that are too often the preserve of the privileged few, putting fairness at the heart of our agenda, and creating a country in which hard work is rewarded and talent is welcome. A nation where contribution matters more than entitlement, merit matters more than wealth. A confident global Britain that doesn't turn its back on globalization, but ensures the benefits are shared by all. A country that is prosperous and secure, so every person may share in the wealth of the nation and live their life free from fear. That's what I mean by a country that works for everyone. And if we believe in the good that government can do, it's important for people to trust us to deliver the change they need. We can start, as I said on Sunday, by doing something obvious. That is to stop quibbling, respect what the people told us on the 23rd of June, and take Britain out of the European Union. Because it took that typically British quiet resolve for people to go out and vote as they did, to defy the establishment, to ignore the threats, to make their voice heard. So let us have that same resolve now, and let's be clear about what is going to happen. Article 50, triggered no later than the end of March. A great repeal bill to get rid of the European Communities Act, introduced in the next parliamentary session. Our laws, made not in Brussels, but in Westminster. Our judges sitting not in Luxembourg, but in courts across the land. The authority of EU law in this country ended forever. The people told us they wanted. The people told us they wanted these things, and this Conservative government is going to deliver them. It is, of course, too early to say exactly what agreement we will reach with the EU. It's going to be a tough negotiation. It will require some give and take. And while there will always be pressure to give a running commentary, it will not be in our national interest to do so. But let me be clear about the agreement we seek. I want it to reflect the strong and mature relationships we enjoy with our European friends. I want it to include cooperation on law enforcement and counter-terrorism work. I want it to involve free trade in goods and services. I want it to give British companies the maximum freedom to trade with and operate within the single market, and let European businesses do the same here. But let's state one thing loud and clear. We are not leaving the European Union only to give up control of immigration all over again. And we're not leaving only to return to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. That's not going to happen. We are leaving to become once more a fully sovereign and independent country, and the deal is going to have to work for Britain. And that Britain and that Britain, the Britain we build after Brexit, is going to be a global Britain. Because while we're leaving the European Union, we will not leave the continent of Europe. We will not abandon our friends and allies abroad, and we will not retreat from the world. In fact, now is the time to forge a bold, new, confident role for ourselves on the world stage, keeping our promises to the poorest people in the world, providing humanitarian support for refugees in need, taking the lead on cracking down on modern slavery wherever it is found, ratifying the Paris Agreement on climate change, always acting as the strongest and most passionate advocate for free trade right across the globe, and always committed to a strong national defence and supporting the finest armed forces known to man. And this week, our excellent Defence Secretary, Michael Fallon, proved not only that we will support them with our heart and souls, not only will we remain committed to spending 2% of our national income on defence, but we will never again, in any future conflict, let those activist, left-wing, human rights lawyers harangue and harass the bravest of the brave, the men and women of our armed forces. It's about restoring fairness, something that must be at the heart of everything we do. Supporting those who do the right thing, who make a contribution. Helping those who give something back. And that's at the heart of my plan for our economy too. An economy that's fair and where everyone plays by the same rules. That means acting to tackle some of the economy's structural problems that hold people back. Things like the shortage of affordable homes, the need to make big decisions on and invest in our infrastructure, the need to rebalance the economy across sectors and areas in order to spread wealth and prosperity around the country. Politicians have talked about this for years, but the trouble is that this kind of change will never just happen by itself. If that's what we want, we need the vision and determination to see it through. And that's why Philip Hammond and Greg Clark are working on a new industrial strategy to address these long-term structural challenges and get Britain firing on all cylinders again. It's not about picking winners, propping up failing industries, or bringing old companies back from the dead. It's about identifying the industries that are of strategic value to our economy and supporting and promoting them through policies on trade, tax, infrastructure, skills, training, and research and development. It's about doing what every other major and growing economy in the world does. Not just sitting back and seeing what happens, but putting in place a plan and getting on with the job. So we will identify the sectors of the economy, financial services, yes, but life sciences, tech, aerospace, car manufacturing, creative industries, and many others that are of strategic importance to our economy, and do everything we can to encourage, develop, and support them. And we will identify the places that have the potential to contribute to economic growth and become the homes to millions of new jobs. That means inspiring an economic and cultural revival of all of our great regional cities. And we've made a start. Thanks to George Osborne's Northern Powerhouse, over the past year, foreign direct investment in the north has increased at double the rate of the rest of the country. Here in Birmingham, thanks to the incredible Jaguar Land Rover, the West Midlands is the only part of the country that runs a trade surplus with China. And across the region, the Midlands engine is on track to deliver 300,000 more jobs by 2020. Now it's time to build on that success in Birmingham and Manchester and in other cities across the country. And as we're here in Birmingham this week, let's show our support for the Conservative Party's candidate for next year's mayoral election. A success in business running John Lewis, an action man in Birmingham playing his part in transforming this city, a man to get things done, the future mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street.
And Theresa May delivering her first speech to the Conservative Party conference as Prime Minister in Birmingham, and baffling a lot of people. Pleasing the room, I think it's fair to say, although I can't remember a party leader addressing a conference, certainly not in the Conservatives' case, that wasn't pleased. Biggest cheers seem to me to have been reserved for saying that soldiers are great. I told you yesterday that would happen. Soldiers are great. Up with soldiers. Down with lawyers. That was the other big cheer. Down with human rights lawyers. And the second biggest boo of the afternoon came when she described slow broadband. Almost, as one commentator has just observed on Twitter, it's almost as if the audience think that they have a human right to fast broadband. I don't know who they'd hire to achieve that. For me, what's astonishing about what we've heard is the absolute abnegation of responsibility. To describe a country that is desperately unfair and in the doldrums in so many ways, when you were Home Secretary for the last 6 years, I genuinely don't get it. But I've been feeling like that a lot lately, as you know. And I wonder whether this commentator here is right when he says that Theresa May has cracked the Brexit lesson. Facts just don't matter. Tell people what they want to hear. And she's kind of done that. But what have they heard that they want to hear? We're going to be mean to lawyers. Soldiers are great. And down with the elites. The Prime Minister decrying the establishment. This is truly rabbit hole stuff, right? The Prime Minister, who was supposed to be a Remain campaigner, I'll remind you of some of the things she said about the European Union in a moment, describing anti-establishment feeling as people voted against the establishment, says the person who was Home Secretary at the time. Remaining inside the European Union does make us more secure, it does make us more prosperous, and it does make us more influential beyond our shores, she said just a few weeks ago. I believe it is clearly in our national interest to remain a member of the European Union. She played it right by pretending that never happened. Would it have been weakness? Genuine question, this phone lines are open. Would it have been weakness if she'd explained why she felt the way she felt? I don't think she could have got away with claiming explicitly that she'd had a massive change of mind. Oh, shiver me timbers, could I have been more wrong about that referendum, folks? So she's just pretended it never happened. She's literally just etch-a-sketched it. Remember when we were kids and you'd do your etch-a-sketch and then you'd shake it at the end and tap the back of it, and it just never happened. It was gone forever. She's just etch-a-sketched her own political career, right? Or not, I don't know. Maybe you heard something different. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Let's keep it friendly now. Let's do a little bit of political analysis. If you are a tax dodger, we are coming after you, says Theresa May, praised in great style and enormous letters on the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, which is owned by a man whose businesses are all based in Bermuda. Is she going to go after Lord Rothermere? Theresa May? Are you? I kind of doubt it, personally. Call me cynical, sceptical. Who is she going to go after? Who's responsible for the state of the country today? Well, it's clearly not the people who were in charge for the last 6 years. It's just bizarre, and yet I wonder whether in this post-fact environment we now inhabit, I wonder whether it might just work. I really do. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What's she actually offering you in this speech? What's she actually saying? I know what she's saying about people like me.
Just listen to the way a lot of politicians and commentators talk about the public. They find your patriotism distasteful, your concerns about immigration parochial, your views about crime illiberal, your attachment to your job security inconvenient. They find the fact that more than 17 million voters decided to leave the European Union simply bewildering. Because if you're well off and comfortable, Britain is a different country, and these concerns are not your concerns.
And if you're not well off and comfortable, it is the liberal elite who have been speaking up for you more loudly, while people on the right wing of the party, right wing of the country, I'm actually losing. I'm going mad here. But can we play that last bit again? Just the last bit, or is that too complicated? No, we have to listen to that. I mean, how can that actually have been said out loud in public? Because the people who are poorly off are the people that are spoken up for by the liberal elite. The people who are saying, look, they're not all feckless work-shy layabouts. The flat-screen television... Did that come from the left wing? The rhetoric of flat-screen televisions and work-shy layabouts? Was it me you heard on the radio or writing in newspapers describing poor people as simply needing to get a better job? Was that the left wing that was saying all that just 3 or 4 years ago? When austerity came in a government that she was Home Secretary in, was it the lefties who were saying that it might not be fair to expect poor people to pay for the financial crisis? Maybe rich people should be paying. Was it not her government that actually reduced the top rate of income tax for people earning over 150 grand a year? I seriously must have gone mad, because I could have sworn blind that she was Home Secretary when austerity came in and deliberately targeted poor, and the right-wing journalists and politicians were the ones saying, well, they deserve it, stop bashing the bankers, go on. I think I'm being trolled by the Prime Minister. Let's just check.
They find the fact that more than 17 million voters decided to leave the European Union simply bewildering. Because if you're well off and comfortable, Britain is a different country, and these concerns are not your concerns.
It's not remotely bewildering. What's bewildering is how you have apparently forgotten that you were on the other side of that argument. I completely understand personally why as a member of the liberal elite, I like to think of myself as one of the leaders. Like in Marvel superheroes, we have different ranks of liberal elitism. As a member, a fully paid up and proud member of the liberal elite, it means I believe in freedom, equality and excellence. I'm also metropolitan, which means I live in a city, but there you go. Apparently that's a bad thing too now. I completely recognise why 17 million people voted to leave the European Union. The only thing that's bewildering Theresa May, and this is madness, right? I'm not imagining this. The reason why it's bewildering is because when you said that remaining inside the European Union makes us more secure, makes us more prosperous, and makes us more influential beyond our shores, you were right. That's why it's bewildering that 17 million people voted to leave, perhaps. Maybe they're bewildered, Prime Minister, because when you said, I believe it is clearly in our national interest to remain a member of the European Union, they believed you. That's why they're bewildered, because 17 million people voted against our national interest. According to you, Theresa May. Not according to some lefty with a column in the Daily Mirror, or this gob on a stick on the wireless at the moment. According to you, it was in our national interest to remain a member of the European Union. So how could people not be bewildered by the decision of 17 million people to do something that you personally described as being against the national interest? I am going mad, aren't I? This is actually surreal. 17 million people bewildered. We're bewildered. You said that remaining inside the European Union does make us more secure, it does make us more prosperous, and it does make us more influential beyond our shores. So, who's bewildered? Exactly? Strange times. That's bewildering, right? Surely she's bewildered. If she believed what she said then she needs to be bewildered now. I believe it is clearly in our national interest to remain a member of the European Union. Fast forward, what, a month, is it? Yeah, 100 days or so. Fast forward 110 days, give or take. And the fact that 17 million voted to leave the EU is bewildering. Of course it's bewildering, Prime Minister, because you told us it was against our national interest. So if people have voted in their millions against their national interest, according to your own words and analysis, how can you not be bewildered by that? What else did she say? In a standoff between Britain and the EU, 44% of our exports is more important to us than 8% of the EU's exports is to them. So you've done some maths there, Mrs May. And it's maths that leads you to the conclusion that it is, and I quote, clearly in our national interest to remain a member of the European Union. So, being bewildered by the decision of 17 million people to vote in a way that is not only against the national interest, but against their own economic interests. This isn't necessarily what I believe, just for the sake of argument. I'm focusing entirely on what she believes. She believes that the country acted against its national interest and that liberal elites are bewildered by that. What would be the normal reaction of somebody who said, I believe it is clearly in our national interest to remain a member of the European Union? 17 million people vote the opposite way. What's her reaction? She's delighted, apparently. It's bad to be bewildered by people voting against our national interest. Her words, not mine. Good to be delighted by it. I'm going, it's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, we may as well give up and go home. You just say anything you want these days. And if it comes with the right tone and it's got a little bit of xenophobia thrown in, a bit of anti-foreigner sentiment, that's it. Great stuff. Oh, and up with soldiers. Soldiers are great. I'm going to be a politician. I've decided. This is going to be my first speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to tell you that soldiers are absolutely wonderful, foreigners are awful, and any decisions taken by governments to which I was actually a member that haven't delivered you great big bouquets of flowers and chocolate cakes on your doorstep every morning, they had nothing to do with me. They were absolutely disgusting, and everything has to change. And right now, change, ladies and gentlemen, change is a-coming. Time for you now to tell me what you thought of Theresa May's speech, and please feel free, if you're new to the programme, to completely contradict anything I've just said, although I think you're going to struggle to tell me how, or to contradict my observation that it's just plain daft to claim that we would be acting against our national interest to leave the European Union 4 months ago, and then to somehow sneer at people who were bewildered by that vote today. That, to me, is almost emblematic of the whole speech, but I didn't hear all of it. Theo Usherwood did. He is LBC's political editor. He is still in Birmingham, and he joins us on the line now. It was an interesting speech, Theo, but not necessarily for the right reasons.
Yes, quite right. I was listening to a bit of your analysis in the last 5 minutes. The EU referendum, James, has become her mandate. Of course, she didn't even have the support of the Conservative Party membership, let alone her own MPs. Well, I say it's become her mandate. I should probably say it's her interpretation of what needs to happen post-June the 23rd that's become her mandate. You asked why she's, in effect, erasing, etch-a-sketching out her past as Home Secretary. Well, the simple truth is, James, she can. This is the price we are paying for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour conference last week. The fact is, there's no opposition. The right-wing press, and I'm talking about the Daily Mail, Daily Telegraph, Times, she's had 4 days of great write-ups and also from the Sunday papers as well. So the reaction, from her own supporters has been significant. And then, of course, she hasn't necessarily had a huge amount of opposition as well. But, and there is a but to this, there is some unease. I've just watched Justine Greening, her face, she was not smiling.
Which bit?
She was talking about immigration at that particular point when I was when it was a fairly glum face. I was looking at it on the screen in front of me, but there is opposition from the right wing in this speech. Later on, she's going to attack the libertarian right, and she talked in her speech, and we'd actually dipped out on this line about government stepping up, not backwards, and particularly this idea that firms should be listing their foreigners. That is not liked by the right wing of our own party. They do not like this interventionist approach from Theresa May. They see that as government taking a step too far. And also, I think we're going to see
Liam Fox is a staunch free trader, isn't he? So this any notion of Heseltine, you're probably a bit young for that reference. No, I know you're not. I'm just patronising you because people get cross if I don't at least once during our exchanges. The point being that Liam Fox and others will hate any notion of state intervention, any notion of interference in business.
Absolutely, but Theresa May, thinks that. She wants to have this idea, and this is something I've picked up all week, that David Cameron sort of floated above floated above, the sort of daily life of politics, the daily life of this, of people across this country. And what Theresa May is trying to do is actually saying, well, I want to do something. And I was speaking to one of her close aides who actually doesn't deal with press but deals with logistics the other day, and he was saying that actually they're enjoying working for Theresa May because there's been a reset, that actually now they feel they have a mission to go and do something, rather than sort of, they're there because they're just there and the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister and it's David Cameron and that's fine. Theresa May actually wants to get on and implement some changes. But you've talked a lot on your programme, James, about the sort of post-truth politics, and perhaps the received wisdom has always been that it starts from the bottom, it starts from the Twitter trolls and the abuse online. But actually the genesis of post-truth politics, judging from Theresa May's speech, it starts at the very top. This idea that ideas come down, as you pick up there, that she was the Home Secretary for 6 years. Immigration, she was a Home Secretary that presided over net migration, which topped 330,000 at one point. And that isn't lost on everybody within the audience here in Birmingham. And that's why the rhetoric sometimes doesn't meet the reality, because Theresa May feels that she has to go that extra mile. She has to go that little bit further.
She has to out UKIP, really.
Exactly. Last year, and she's true to form on that. You may not like, but you may say it doesn't sync with what happened before the referendum. But it certainly syncs with her speech to the conference last year in Manchester, when she said that no good had ever come of immigration. And the liberal elites down in Westminster throw their hands up and say that this is, she's gone too far. But actually, when you go out and you speak to the membership, the Conservative membership, they like it.
They do like it, and she's trying to not to play one side off against the other, but she's trying to keep all of the people happy all of the time, which clearly isn't going to work. Can you see pratfalls ahead? Where might the first problems emerge in the brave new dawn of Theresa May's premiership?
I think there's going to be real pushback when the autumn statement comes from Philip Hammond, the Chancellor. This idea, he was very lacking. There was lacking detail in his speech, but he's not going to. They've said, Theresa May said when she spoke at the beginning of her leadership campaign, before everybody dropped out, that she wouldn't raise taxes. And of course, then that begs the question: how are you going to reduce the deficit if we're shifting away from George Osborne's economics of trying to run a surplus by 2019, 2020? That's obviously not going to happen. But how are you going to cut public spending? And that, I think, is going to be a real sore point, a real break from the past that many Conservatives don't like. Okay, George Osborne didn't make his targets, he failed to meet his targets, but when those targets were set, the Conservatives liked them.
I just want to clarify something you said earlier about Jeremy Corbyn, because you're not in possession of your own box of trolls yet, Theo Usherwood. Mine,
get a few.
I know you do, but these things are relative. What you were pointing out was that some simple observations, like the fact that 4 months ago Theresa May described leaving the European Union as being against the national interest, and today claims that anybody who being bewildered by the decision of 17 million people to vote against what she described as the national interest seems a little contradictory. The point you were making is that she can get away with this to a degree because Jeremy Corbyn isn't landing punches from the other side of the House of Commons or from the other side of British politics. So it was a fairly, I thought, uncontroversial observation, but I'll leave you to deal with some of the more frenzied reaction to that when you return to social media later today.
Just quickly on that, just as you were making that point, James, I opened up my email inbox to see whether I'd had anything land from the Labour press office. Nothing. I've been online, I had a look on Twitter. I've seen one article on Labour List website from John Ashworth, actually, and he's a friend of Tom Watson, the deputy leader, and knows about attack politics, if you like, what needs to happen. And he's the only person I've managed to, I've been listening to the speech as well, I'm sure there'll be others, but to right now, he is the only Labour voice speaking out against Theresa May. She has a clear run.
And that is not necessarily a bad thing if you like the sound of what you heard earlier today, and we'll play some sort of highlights imminently. I struggle with a few points. I'm not going to lie to you. It's great journalistically, this. It means we've got stuff to talk about every day. That's the only thing I wake up in the night having cold sweats about. Oh, that and the rise of race hate. But having something to talk about every day is important to both of us. Can you explain to me how she gets away with effectively describing the last 6 years as involving the unnecessary exploitation of the poor, while not acknowledging that she was Home Secretary during that period, or indeed how she can complain about people being bewildered by the EU vote when she told me and you and everybody in this country that to leave the European Union would be to act against our national interest. I'll take whatever analysis you've got, because I've got nothing. Tom's in Clapham. Tom, what would you like to say?
Hello, good afternoon, mate.
Hello, Tom.
I just wanted to add to your point about how she contradicts herself. In fact, the speech she made earlier on, she contradicts herself a couple of times within the same speech. For example, she said things like, I believe that everyone isn't equal no matter what background you come from or what country you come from, as well as saying that she believes that businesses should give the locals a better opportunity,
that's the opposite of equality, isn't it?
Exactly. It takes away the whole demeanor of equality, you know, saying that everyone should be equal. Oh, but no, the locals should have an advantage, or the Brits should have an advantage. So it's not equal, is it? Like, I would like to hope, and I wish that most of the people that are listening to her can see straight through her, like me and you can. It's very frightening listening to her.
Speak for yourself, Tom. I'm scrupulously impartial. It's 12:43. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. What did you hear? Because I heard a woman who's been Home Secretary for the last 6 years effectively describe the government she served in as being responsible for all manner of mess, and specifically for the exploitation of poor people. And then she sort of used this catch-all Faragian phrase, liberal elite, to describe the kind of commentators and journalists who've been speaking out against austerity as being out of touch. Now, that doesn't work logically, but, as both sides of the Atlantic show us recently, logic is... I tell you, logic is going the way of dealy boppers and loom pants. It's never been less fashionable. Helen's in Dunstable. Helen, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'm just going to say that I sent a really ranty email to you in the leadership elections saying that Theresa May never ever accepts responsibility for anything that she does, and having been a Home Office employee for a number of years under her, there's been numerous examples of where policies have changed and everything else, but she doesn't actually accept responsibility for any of it.
Well, what sort of examples did you forgive me, I get a lot of ranty emails. I don't read many of them through to the end. But I got one this morning. It was about 3 pages long. I almost felt guilty when I deleted it after reading 3 words.
I have to be a bit careful.
I know you do. I'm conscious. I'm an
ex-government employee, so I can't really go into... But I mean, there was an occasion where she agreed to a particular policy on entry, and when the ministers found out and actually complained, she denied any knowledge of it, and somebody fell for that.
Yeah. It's the impression you get is that
somebody got actually had to resign over that, and that was quite serious. And I can't really accept the fact that a woman would throw someone under a bus.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, well, I suppose if I'm going to be a fully paid up member of the liberal elite, I now have to attack you for your sexism. Why would a woman be less likely to throw anyone under a bus than a man, Helen?
No, sorry, I didn't mean it.
I know you don't. I'm just worried about my liberal elite credentials.
No, sorry, I don't understand anyone that has credibility and faith in what they're doing would actually do that, because if you believe in your ideals, then you should stick by them.
Well, if you believe in your ideals, you should stick by them. This is a woman who said it would be against our national interest to leave the European Union, and today describes the commentators and politicians who are bewildered by the fact that 17 million people voted to act against the national interest. It really is rabbit hole stuff, this. Helen, thank you. And I won't inquire any further into your insights. 12:45 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I hate it when I agree with that Mr. James O'B. It doesn't happen very often, but today is the day. # Theresa May. I don't have an opinion yet. I just have confusion about how she can be talking about the bewilderment of the liberal elite at the fact that 17 million people voted to leave the EU, when just weeks ago she told us it would be against our national interest and would compromise our security and would damage our economy to do so. It's just odd. And you know that thing about foreigners being listed in companies? Try this on for size. You can use this in the pub later. How many different nationalities do you think there were on HMS Victory at the Battle of Trafalgar? Go on, have a guess. Different nationalities, not just the number of foreigners, but the number of nationalities. So the number of foreigners on that ship would be even bigger than the number of nationalities. Have a guess. Have a guess. Go on, say a number. Say it out loud, unless you're in company. What do you reckon? Nationalities? HMS Victory, 12? Caroline suggests. Mark, what do you think? Mark's gone for 10. Sophie? Yeah, all right, sport. 22 different nationalities. Nelson would have had to have written them all down on a list to demonstrate to Amber Rudd that he tried really hard to find British crew. 22 different nationalities. One of the finest moments in British history. We're going to need a longer list, Admiral. 22 nationalities. A little bit more reaction to Theresa May's speech, a baton which I suspect Sheila Fogarty will take up with alacrity after 1 o'clock. Ben is in Clacton-on-Sea. Ben, what would you like to say?
Well, I reckon they've locked the real Theresa May up in a room and brought her avatar for the conference.
It's all gone a bit Doctor Who.
Well, if you look at the movie Avatar, there was somebody locked in a cabinet somewhere and somebody else was impersonating them. I mean, you're exactly right. All you said this morning about our performance in the last government, I mean, workers' rights, that is a joke because of the...
Well, 6 years we've had to provide this. 6 years of liberal elites like me suggesting that poor people shouldn't be paying for the banking crisis.
Yes, and the bedroom tax, which a lot of pensioners don't realise that they're going to have to pay it next year as well.
Is that the rule?
Yes, it's coming in.
I need to check that. I need to check. No, I could, just because I don't want to frighten people unduly. So I'm not. Well, I'll check that myself. I will
and let them know.
Yeah.
But I've read it in the newspaper, so it must be true. Anyway.
No, you've just been silly.
Yeah, the other thing was workers' rights. I mean, it's financially impossible to take an employer to court for unfair dismissal for an ordinary employee.
Well, you're not even allowed to try for 2 years. You've got to have been on the books for 2 years. They doubled that within minutes of getting through the doors of Downing Street. Likelihood of getting any form of legal aid or support to go to tribunal, 0. Nilch. Nilch?
Yes,
I just made up a word. I should be Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, you have to find, and I know because I have a trade union background.
Boo, liberal elite. What do you know about the working class with your trade union background? We need more bankers.
Well, I used to represent people who were on 80,000 a year and right down to someone who was on £80 a week.
Yes.
So I know the range of people that are actually in society. And you can't generalise, because a lot of rich people are decent.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You can generalise about things like tax rates. You can say a tax rate should be higher, but you can't say all rich people are... Well, you can't say that they're all either liberal elites or mill owners and master sweeps. That would be a generalisation too far.
Yeah, and it just seems entirely opposite to what you were saying, as you say, Tuesday months
I think we can probably all agree on that, because the words are here. They're published, they're printed, they're facts. This phrase post-fact now comes into the equation, because even though I don't think anybody with a functioning intellect can dispute the fact that she said it would be against our national interest to leave the European Union, so to describe the reaction of people that believed her as bewildered is just daft. I mean, it's actually trolling in a way. But I still ask you this question. Is she going to pull it off?
No, I don't think she is, because there's a sinister element creeping in now about this business about foreigners.
Some people like that. Some people like that.
The problem is the thugs that beat up foreigners over the increase in the attacks on foreigners, they don't identify, they just look at foreigners. And every foreigner, they can't single out people from Europe until they open their mouth. But, this is the type of thing that used to happen in 1939. It's getting a bit sinister now.
I think you may have missed the top of the show today. Admittedly, it was nearly 3 hours ago, where I read a line out of Mein Kampf and found chilling echoes with this new workers' lists idea.
Lists of people. I mean, that is frightening. And I think she's losing control, and she's being taken over by the extreme right. I mean, it's crazy. And I think there's going to be an economic disaster in this country. I mean, we don't produce much anymore because it was destroyed during the Thatcher years. And we depend on services. Now, a lot of these services, the brakes will come off in Germany, Frankfurt and Paris against us.
Well, we'll see. We're covering a lot of ground, Ben. I know it's my fault, actually. I'm still reeling from that speech. I should have squeezed in a couple more. I will speak soon, I'm sure. Matthew's in Enfield. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I think what she's saying sounds brilliant, but again, I think she's just saying what we want to hear. I think, how the Brexit...
Not what I want to hear.
Well, I want to hear a bit more, but some of the things she's saying, I liked it. I like some of the things she's saying.
Up with soldiers, I can go with that. Soldiers are great. Down with human rights.
Well, this is what this government is all
human,
about.
so I am a bit biased.
Divide and conquer. Sorry, I think you've spoken enough today, James. You've been speaking the whole show.
You're damn right. Quick, use the last minute. Use the last minute. Have it all to yourself.
Yeah, well, I just think that for me, it's all about the tax. I just think that. We need to do something for the people, and that includes working class and middle class. Now, why can't we change the tax bracket slightly? If you're earning £40,000 a year, pay 25% tax. If you're earning £60,000 a year, pay 28% tax. Why is it that if you work hard, they take all your bloody money? Excuse the French. It's just very frustrating.
If you earn over, to double or triple what you've just described, there's a new tax rate for you. But I guess everybody thinks the rich should be paying more and they should be paying less. That's part of the problem that she's tried to address. I hope you feel you had a fair crack of the whip there, Matthew. Paul, I've only got time to say hello. Hello.
Hi.
And that was the end of Paul's contribution to the programme. We will be doing all this again tomorrow morning from 10. You have been listening to James O'Brien on LBC. That speech, I'm still wrestling with what it is about a Home Secretary saying leaving the European Union will compromise national security and be bad for us, and then people who are bewildered by the decision to leave. Surely she should be bewildered. I'm bewildered. We're all bewildered now. Sheila Fogarty's here. She's not bewildered.